Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to Lady K Chat, a podcast that is designed for men and women to become better versions of themselves, which is broadcast every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Various subjects will be spoken upon, such as relationships, health and wellness, personal development, wealth building, children, and so much more. She is a 2-time Amazon best-selling author, an international speaker and life coach. She is Lady K. And now for your host, Lady K. Viewer discretion is advised. This podcast contains material and language that may be disturbing and not suitable for all audiences.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lady K Chat podcast. You are with your favorite host, Lady K. I would just like to give you a warm invite for being with me today because we're going to be talking about a very touchy subject that a lot of people don't even like to talk about. They don't even know what to do in these situations. And this is why Lady K is bringing the heat and speaking about it. So today's show is actually called Speak Up. And I'm specifically talking about domestic violence. And what a lot of people don't know, under the branch of domestic violence, there's a lot of categories. And one particular today, I'm touching base on sexually assault. And if you have been following me for the past 2 weeks, I had a special guest, Miss Deborah Kofer. And in our session, she opened up about her childhood. And she talked about how she dealt with the child abuse from her own father. That is very hurtful to have the one person that's supposed to protect you do all these things to you. So I said, you know what? We have to continue to talk about this. And right now, especially that we're in this pandemic, there's a lot of children that's home with their abuser and they can't even speak out because they are scared because they are with them 24/7. And one more thing I have to mention, in that interview, if you miss it, I would advise you to go back and listen. In that interview, she specifically said one time somebody called child services. Child services asked her, was everything okay? She looked that lady dead on her face and said, I'm okay. She had the ability and the option to speak up and she couldn't even because she froze. So this is why today I had to bring the lovely Miss Tomay Varlack-Butler with me today. She is the CEO of Worthshop Inc. I will let her talk about that a little bit later in the show, but I brought her on because she kind of is bridging the gap in the psychology world and she can understand from as a parent perspective and also as a psychologist, the trauma of sexual assault. So everyone, please help me welcome Mrs. Butler. How are you, Tomay?
I'm good. I do want to just make one quick adjustment. If that's
sure.
Okay. I'm a social worker, not a psychologist.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Right.
I apologize.
It's okay.
You know, I get all these acclamations all messed up, so apologies.
That's
but
okay.
Still, I know you still understand, the psychology world because you had to study that in order to get your degree, Tomay. But today, specifically, there's a lot of people that's under the pressure because they see certain things going on. They don't know how to open up and talk about it. And I know that you've been through this experience before. So before I even go on an actual particular question, I do want to say this to my audience. One day I was specifically in a Facebook and I was on this group and this lady was complaining about how she took her daughter to the doctor because her daughter was a teenager and the doctor asked her to step out the room, because once they get to a certain age, they can ask them safe questions. And she said she didn't like it, but I have to also mention from my perspective, I think it's a great thing because it gives the children the opportunity to speak up in a safe place. So I know a lot of people may not agree, but you got to understand this child's safety in all areas. And I think that's one great area that, with the Pediatric Association, they took lead on it and allowed to children to speak up because we need more children to speak up. Because if not, they carry this baggage with them. And then when you're turning into adulthood, then you're dealing with stuff in your childhood that you haven't even tackled. And we don't even want that. So I know I said a mouthful, but in your experience, I know you dealt with this personally. Can you tell us a little bit about your story and how you dealt with the situation?
So I do have a host of stories. Are you referring specifically to what I experienced with my daughter?
Yes.
Okay. So my daughter basically shared, some concerns in school. And what she shared was she kept basically just telling the teacher she didn't want a specific boy next to her, and in the way they were seated. And the teacher, of course, just assumed like she just was being difficult that day. And that's what teachers think of Black children, that they just show up to be difficult, which is not true. And basically what was happening was that person was triggering her. And so at some point, because he wouldn't leave her alone, she took a crown, and she tried to stab him with the crown, but the crown broke, of course. But this was something that they really looked at, and they called me into the school. And at that time, I was able to review some of her drawings. So over the past week, she had been drawing some pictures that were very graphic in nature. And quite frankly, she was too young to be able to draw it so accurately, a picture of a penis.
Wow.
Yeah. So when that happened, the first thing I did, and the first thing I recommend that all parents do, or in any case where you see there's a possible sexual assault or sexual abuse or child abuse, is to actually listen. To listen. Not interrogate, but to listen to what they're sharing and then believe them. Too often parents, they don't believe the child because they're a kid.
Right.
But they still are able to think and do, and we expect them to respond to us, right, when we give them direction. So why can't we listen to them when they're trying to tell us something that happened to them? Right. So that just sent me on this whole space where I just became this advocate for my daughter. And I knew I had to stand up and advocate for her because I didn't have that growing up myself when I experienced child sexual abuse, and what happens that can prevent it from coming out is biologically the child just shuts down. The child freezes, and they're unable to articulate their needs because in that moment they feel like the whole world has been disoriented and they can't trust adults. So why would they share with an adult what another adult just did?
Absolutely.
But in my daughter's case, it was another child. And one of the things that I had to learn in that process was in my engagement at the time with a couple of family members, it was more of this inquiry of, well, maybe it's not what they said, and having that engagement with the family as opposed to what I needed to do, it came up where the school reported it to ACS and ACS became involved. And although I did everything I was supposed to advocate, I took her to the doctor like I was supposed to, but because I didn't report that first, by taking her directly to the doctor, the school assumed it was a form of negligence.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's the other reason why I always, implore parents, especially, that the first thing after they listen and they believe and they show support to their child and they reassure their child it's not their fault. That's one of the most reassuring factors that can help the child restabilize and grow and transform that trauma so they're not carrying it throughout their adult lives.
Right.
And so with that, I had to have all of these different meetings, with Child Protection Services. It was a horrific ordeal for me to go through.
Right.
And not just because what was happening with my daughter, but because I had to also deal with my own emotions around what was happening. I felt like I failed her as a parent. You know, I felt like I let her down. I couldn't protect her. You know, and all those things were outside of my control because it actually happened when she was visiting with other family members.
Right.
It was still something that just weighed on me because in my mind, I kept thinking, you went through this. How couldn't you see the signs? Why didn't you see the signs? You know, and so even in that, I had to grow through that process and show compassion to myself. Because if I couldn't give myself compassion, then I wouldn't be able to extend it to my daughter.
Absolutely.
And that was the most important thing. So in going through that process, you know, I had to meet several times. We had to meet with the police officer because they were waiting for her to name the abuser. And we weren't sure at the time if it was an adult. Okay. You know, but I think the thing that made her so resilient in this process is that she saw her mom sitting next to her every step of the way through each and every process. You know, and because of her age, they didn't ask me to leave the room. You know, and the one thing I also witnessed and observed, and something that, of course, during graduate school and as a social worker and engaging with clients, is that you don't keep asking the same questions. You don't keep saying, tell me what happened, tell me what happened. Because there is power in telling our stories and naming our truths, but there's also a fine line that can be crossed where you re-traumatize the person.
Right. And it's kind of seemed like some kids, they don't want to relive that. And just real briefly, I just want to share that I had a family member go through something very similar. And this child, they opened up and they spoke. But when you try to talk to them now, they be like, nope. They don't want to because they don't want to relive it. So I can definitely co-sign to what you're saying because it breaks my heart just to watch this child go through this. And one thing that I heard you say, Tomay, was give the child support because they need to know that you're with them every step of the way. And this child, it was just getting one-sided support. So I think that was another reason why that child, you know, specifically shut down. So I think support is crucial all around. But I just wanted to jump in real quick and say that, but I'm going to allow you to continue on with your story.
Well, I mean, you know, just to piggyback off what you said with support, it's okay if it's one-sided.
Right.
Because what is crucial is that support is given. What people don't really understand about trauma is that the impact of trauma can be long-lasting and long-standing in a person's life, depending on how it was attended to when it happened. So just the mere fact of having someone, you know, say, it's not your fault, I'm here for you. You don't have to talk about it, but if you want to, I'm listening. You know, giving them those affirmations and letting them know that they're still, you know, that brave child, that amazing person, you know, still affirming who they were or even how they saw themselves before.
Right.
You know, allowing them to still be playful, because the other thing that happens is people think for some odd reason that once a person has experienced some type of abuse or trauma, that they're no longer independent thinking beings, that they need you to tell them everything they need to do, that they need somebody to always make decisions for them. And that is harmful. That can cause more trauma, because what a person needs, especially a child, is for you to still let them have autonomy over who they are. Let them be able to express themselves freely.
Right.
And then to empower them. Because what people feel who experience trauma, sexual assault, child sexual abuse, what they experience is this disempowerment. They feel powerless, helpless in that moment, depending on the circumstances. And if a person, an adult, come in and say, this is what you need to do, this is where you need to go, this is that, do this, do that, you're further disempowering them. Okay. The goal is to empower them. Right. You know, and the way we do that is by asking questions. Absolutely. And not the questions to extract information about what happened, but asking those questions like, what do you need?
Right.
How can I help you? What would make you, process this better? If it's a child, it would be a different question. How can mommy make you feel better? How can mommy make this easier?
Right.
Not by saying, okay, from now on, you're not going out, you're not doing, like, that's not helping.
Right.
Because that's making them feel more crippled. And I think the other thing that, and I'm speaking from lived experience, but I'm also speaking from experience as a social worker.
Right.
And also as a restorative justice practitioner, because I do a lot of healing work and healing circles in that realm as well. And the thing is, I can't even emphasize it more, is that to have that sense of safety reestablished is key to being able to navigate life, in a healthy way.
Right. Tomay, you did say something so powerful that does dawn on me. When you was talking about giving the child support and, and don't dictate their every movement because they feel like they won't have a voice, or they probably feel like, you're justifying my every move, so I can't even breathe. I feel like in the moment when that particular person took their innocence from them, it's like that person already just took something from them unwillingly. So I feel like if you keep taking from someone unwillingly, they're going to continue to shut down. But like you said, if you allow them to be in that safe space and you allow them to flow and you're just telling them, I'm there for the support, that means everything. So I think a lot of people need to keep that in the mind, even though they want to know what happened. But like you said, it's specific questions that can be asked. And of course, you already know there's people that's trained in that area to do so. Would you say, should the parent leave it to the experts to do that? Or do you feel like the parents should try to chime in and try to pull it out the child to talk about the experience that happened to them?
Well, I have to admit that I am opposed to using language like expert.
Okay.
And that's rooted in my faith. The only expert over my life is God.
Amen.
and so I would never, and let me just not even say never, because I have done it and I saw the ramifications of it, but I wouldn't ever again. And I wouldn't recommend to a parent that you leave this up to, a doctor or a psychologist or a social worker or a mental health counselor. No.
Okay.
It has to be a collaboration. That's part of the community, that comes forward. Like they say, it takes a village to raise a child.
Absolutely.
It takes that same village to heal a child.
Ooh. Right. Absolutely. I agree with you on that. I piggyback on that one. So it takes the village to help heal that child. But for the people who don't have a lot of support, what would you recommend for them? And when I say support, I mean support from family.
Right. So community is everything.
Right.
And this is why. So one of the things that I did in working while working with young people is I helped them to see themselves as the CEO of their life, right? And then to see their parents, if they have both parents, the parent is the president and vice president,
Absolutely.
right? Of their organization, if you will. But it's important to add people at that table that will empower you and connect with you and support you. So even having young people having close friends and connected to their parents, because sometimes the reality is you may not be able to elicit information from your child, but that other adult, that's connected to, their friend, their mom, if they're able to tell them and you have a good relationship with that mother and she comes back and tell you, then it's still going to work out for good.
Absolutely.
So that's why it's important that, and a lot of times we don't do that, especially as Black women, because it's hard to trust,
right?
With the way things happen and betrayals, like every time you turn around. But it is important to not focus on the fear aspect of what might happen, but to connect with somebody's humanity.
Right.
So that the adult, the parent, is establishing a community, a village as well, if they don't have it. And this can show up as a coach in the school.
Right.
Right. A coach in the school. I always tell students in the building, go and identify safe adults and come back and know who they are.
Right. It's funny that you say that because, right now I'm teaching my son, about strangers. So he's like, that's a stranger and you don't talk to. But I'm at the point now to like, I don't want to instill in him, don't talk to all strangers, because at some point, if something happens, you have to talk to some stranger, just in case, depending on your situation. So I'm trying to have that conversation with him. It depends on the adult. It depends on the situation, but it's so hard to grasp that to a 5-year-old. But I think I love how you brought that up, because I think it's important for us to specifically say, okay, in a situation, you got to talk to, the stranger, but you got to make sure this stranger is going to help you. And it's so hard because you just never know people's intentions. You never know people's motives. You're trying to teach your children correctly, but sometimes you just never know sometimes.
Right. And so that's the message too, like for parents,
right.
Like myself, when I felt like I failed, for parents not to blame themselves either when these things happen, because it was simply out of your control, and out of my control. And in a way that I help young people identify a safe person is by, let's do this checklist. Let's talk about who's not safe. And we'll look at their actions. We'll look at their behavior. We look at how other children react to them.
Okay.
Because if there's an adult where no child wants to be around them,
there's a problem.
Right. That's the family member that everybody wants to stay away from. Then, yeah, that's pretty much one clue. And even to be able to say it's okay to trust people, because I think about this whole concept right from the Bible where Jesus was looking at a tree, right? It was a fig tree. But then the Bible talks about as he got closer to the tree, then he realized it wasn't producing any fruit. So it do take for us to move closer, and Bell Hooks, she has a quote that says, when we drop fear, we draw closer to people.
Absolutely.
And we need to draw closer to people. That's the only way we're going to get to know them. And yes, it's a risk, but to be able to identify those risks that, are more harmful. So when you're talking to a child, if there's an adult in the building that is always offering you a gift,
right,
or candy, or if there's an adult who says something like, let's keep this between me and you, like give specific examples to the child of what a safe adult is and what they look like, and one who isn't safe.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I hope everyone, you are taking key notes, because this is crucial right here on how to educate our children what to look for. So thank you for that, Tomay.
You're welcome.
So I know we talked a lot about support and, having the community support. So what does it look like when a child have not received support and then they grow up to be this adult and now they're dealing with this? Pretty much they haven't told no one and they have this baggage, held onto their heart. What does that look like? Like untreated. It's pretty much, you're untreated. You're not treated. And I see there's a lot of adults that's out there walking around untreated.
Right. Such a great question, Kalima. I'm glad that you asked that, because on the outside, it looks like normal people. Going to work, going to school, getting in relationships,
right.
But the problem is we're not getting into relationship with the adults that we're looking at. When they're untreated, we're actually getting into relationship with the untreated child. We're getting into relationship with that child that has been harmed and not healed.
Wow. That was powerful right there. That line all by itself. That inner child that they have not dealt with. Okay, continue. Elaborate. I want more.
Right. So it's interesting because it can show up, people can show up as resilient, strong, vibrant, high functioning, and yet, behind closed doors, they're dealing with inadequacy. They're dealing with these controlling factors and controlling impulses, making sure, and sometimes it'll show up in a person's house. Everything is so perfect and you can admire it, but if you touch something, that just sets them off.
Right.
That's their trauma, and they're not aware of it. Absolutely. Something as small as that, or continuously getting into relationships and something is wrong with everybody that you got into a relationship with. It's something wrong with every woman. It's something wrong with every man, and it's often cloaked in, well, I made the decision to walk away because of this. It has to do with that unhealed trauma.
Absolutely. That's very powerful that you state that, because just speaking from my own experience, I was dating a man at one point, and it was a nice guy, but I realized he had certain triggers, and when he lashed out. And I said, this is not healthy. See, I was at that place once where, it was just natural for me just to lash out. And I was like, no, you can't do that. You got to get yourself intact. You can't expect people to take that type of abuse, because that is abuse, especially when you think you're never wrong. And everybody, like you said, everybody else is always incorrect and everybody else have to step up their game. But when do you take the time and work on yourself? So this particular individual, like I said, it was a great person, but I had to cut that cord because he was not willing to work on himself. And I know a lot of people say too, we grow up, like you said, we be resilient, we get into relationships, you meet this wonderful person. I love him, but you got to also ask yourself, do you want to deal with that toxic behavior constantly when they haven't dealt with it? And, you really have to, me personally, I just really feel like you really got to say to yourself, okay, you really want to deal with this person that's willing to overlook, what they went through and not take the chance to work on themselves. That's what you got to ask yourself. And can you deal with it? Because this is what it looks like when you grow up untreated. And I understand, there's that one person for everybody. And maybe that one person can say, listen, you really need to seek therapy, or listen, you really need to open up and talk about your experience. That's great, because that person was probably God sent to you. But there are a lot of people that's not going to sit there and take your crap. And it's not fair to them. And they shouldn't have to, make you do anything, because we can't make people do nothing, but we can make them feel comfortable. And this is, again, leaning back on that support that you said. Once they feel like they're supported, they probably feel like they can accomplish a lot of stuff. And hopefully, the ending result is to open up into the shared experience. And this is why I call the show Speak Out, because we need enough people speaking out, letting them know they are not by themselves. I done spoke with a multitude of a lot of women who say they experienced sexual abuse at an early childhood and they never told their parents. And I said, wow, that really hurts my heart that you can't even open up and tell your own parents what happened to you. And now you're this adult and you still bottling up inside. Like, I have a girlfriend this recently has told me she just started seeking counseling. And I'm very proud of her because she had a lot of stuff boiling up inside. And she, to this day, again, her parents don't even know Tomay.
That's normal.
Yeah. That's like the new norm, everybody. And also too, I also grasp the point too, we're in a different day and age, because back then, you just don't talk about it. You don't tell that. You don't tell on Uncle Peter. You don't tell on Uncle Tom. That's still family. And I really wish people get out that mindset. I don't care if they family. Your job as a parent or even as an adult, if you see something, is to report it. And a lot of people are not reporting it. So I urge everyone to support the child. And again, like you said, Tomay, go back to that community base. It takes a village to step in and to step out. But I know we're almost running out of time, but I just want you a little bit to tell me a little bit about your Worthshop Incorporation and how do you help the community in your business?
So the nonprofit is Worthshop.
Yes.
So And it's affirming worth to change lives. And that's the nonprofit. A lot of my other work I also do is as the founder of Grammy Beautiful Inc., which is the for-profit organization. And the common thread is helping people heal. Helping people heal, helping people to identify the trauma. Because even as you were speaking and talking about, women engaging men, I would also, talk to women. Did you heal first before you started dating?
Right.
Did you heal first because if you heal, your lens will be a bit more clearer so you can identify, oh, he looks like a man. Oh, and he talks like one. He smells like one. His touch is like one.
Yes.
But no, on the inside, it's not. His mindset is not. His behavior, his responses, his reactions is one of a man who's been harmed and not healed. And unless he's willing to do it together and with you, or just separate to do it aside from each other,
right,
then it's going to end up in all of these broken relationships and broken marriages. That's what's happening. So I do work with families. I do racial healing circles. I actually, I've been doing a lot of previous work in higher education, and dealing with the aftermath of George Floyd and everything that's been happening and coming up and helping to mediate these tensions around racial differences. So it's just healing. Healing is what I am committed to doing,
right.
And it's a sacred duty and a call, and educating and empowering through information. It's important that I often tell people, because I'm a PhD student at the University of San Diego, and, people say, well, I don't have a degree. You don't need a degree to be educated. You need to be informed.
Absolutely.
You need to be informed.
Exactly.
So I love informing people.
Exactly. And thank you for that, Tomay, because that's one of the reasons why I created this platform, to inform people and to give them a place and a space to receive this type of information, because I do think it's vital. And, we can all help one another. And I just love what you're doing in the community. So thank you. I commend you for wanting to help to heal people, because we do need this healing in this crazy world. So Tomay, if people wanted to get in contact with you or even find more about Worthshop, how can they contact you or how can they reach you?
Well, they can actually text Heal My Life to 55444. And they can get on my list, and they can get updates on what's coming up and different things like that.
Thank you, Tomay. I really appreciate all of this. Everyone, I hope you got some key information out of this. Continue to follow us at the Lady K Chat Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and on our website at www.ladykeenterprisesinc.com, and K is spelled Kay. Thank you, everyone, and you have a great night.
Lady K.